An API document is a concise reference manual intended for developers containing all the necessary information to work and integrate with an API. It also provides information about the API's lifecycle, such as new versions of retirements. That being said, the Open API specification provides a standard for describing REST APIs using either the JSON or the YAML format, which are very easy to learn and both readable by humans and machines. So in this lesson, I will show you how to write an Open API document using the YAML format, as it offers a more compact syntax than JSON, and how to serve it as HTML to your end users through a dedicated route of the application. The Open API document is usually composed of at least three fields: Open API, Info, and Path. The Open API string describes the version number of the Open API specification used in the document, which in turn defines its overall structure. The Info object provides metadata about the API itself, where the only two mandatory fields are the version, which is an arbitrary string that specifies the version of the API and that should not be mistaken with the Open API version, and the title, which is a string of characters that represents the name of the API. The Path object holds the relative path of the API endpoints and their HTTP methods, also called operations. Here, an operation is an object usually composed of a mandatory responses object that describes the HTTP responses returned by this route, an optional description string that describes the route itself, and an optional request body object that specifies the parameters contained within the payload. A responses object is composed of an HTTP status, an optional description, a mem type, and a response schema. This schema can, for example, be a string in the case of a text response, or an object in the case of a JSON response, whose properties can be listed under the properties key of the schema object. On the other hand, a request body object is similar to a response object and is composed of a mem type and a request schema, which can be completed with a required field that indicates which of the body properties must be included in the payload. Now, since the actual Open API document for this application contains a lot of lines, let's directly download it from the Learn Backend GitHub repository by first opening a new browser tab and visiting github.com/learnbackend/Node.js authentication microservice, clicking on the Open API document, then on the Raw button. Let's now copy the content of this file, move back to our project folder on our local machine, and create a new file in the root directory of our application named openapi.yaml, and finally paste the content of this file we just copied here. When developing a public API with the Express framework, the easiest way to make its API documentation available to other developers is to use the Swagger UI Express package that allows us to serve Open API documents written in JSON as HTML pages via a dedicated route. Now, since our API document is written in YAML, we're going to need an additional package such as YAML.js that converts YAML into JSON. So let's start by installing both packages. Let's now open the server loader module and import them into it. Use the load function of the YAML.js package to load and convert the API document into a valid JSON object. And finally, use the serve and setup middleware functions provided by the Swagger package on the docs mount path of the application the following way to serve the API document as an HTML page. Now that we're all set, we can restart our application and open the following tab in our browser to access the API documentation page.